Welcome to Sprinkle with Hope podcast and your host, Shane. And today we have seriously an amazing guest. Meridith Alexander has gone through a lot of things in her life. Really, she had her daughter actually had an accident a few years ago. It really changed her life and Meredith's. And so we're going to talk about that today and really how moments in life can change your life, but in some ways they could be tragic moments that happen, but you can turn it around to be a really positive thing. And so Meridith will find out that Jason and I love to talk about the positive, and so we'll focus on those things, of course, learning and those things that you have learned throughout the course. So Meridith, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited that you are joining us.
I am super excited to be here, and don't worry, the positivity works just well with me, perfectly.
Very good. So for those people who don't know this story of you and your daughter, just give us a high level, just what happened, and then we'll talk about things that you've learned from that experience.
Sure. So, it was a glorious afternoon, a Friday afternoon on February 19th, 2016. And I was buzzing through my life as a single mom, entrepreneur, chasing about 40 gazillion things at one time, and trying to pretend that I was achieving any of them without driving myself into the ground. Right. And so I was just getting to the point where Skylar was my youngest, and she was the last to have graduated. All of my kids were out into the world, very much on their way to doing amazing things. Sky had graduated from Yale, so she had decided to spend the year on a Yale fellowship in South America, working with the native populations, doing things like building a school and working on the farms or with weaving. And she was going to do that for an entire year. So she had completed one portion of it. She'd actually built a school in Peru and come home for Christmas, and now was headed back to the second leg, which was also in Peru, going to be with this small little village of weaving women. Well, as a bonding experience with her soon-to-be boss, who was her sister's age, the two young women decided to go to Colombia for a couple of weeks and take it in, rappel down waterfalls, do all kinds of extraordinary things, live in yurts. And lo and behold, the day before they were leaving, they set up this wonderful whitewater rafting expedition, went over the incredibly treacherous part, and came to this beautiful little grotto where they had the opportunity to jump off a ledge and swim. Skylar, of course, being the daredevil that she was probably the first in the water. No one will confirm that for me, but I just know. And she inspired the entire group to climb up this treacherous cliff, get to the ledge, jump off. And of course, once you've done it once, you have to do it again, right?
Of course.
Yes. And so they're making their way up the second or the third time. And somehow, in the midst of all of this, as Sky was following the leader behind some people, someone in front of her, their foot slipped and it dislodged a boulder. And the boulder came catapulting down, cracked open her skull, knocked her off of the cliff onto the rocks below, and left her with, as her friend Dana shared with me, a laundry list of injuries, 4 of them typically fatal. So I got this call at 3:15 in the afternoon on a Friday, and my world changed in that instant, as you can imagine. And so what followed from there was very, very, very surreal on one level, and on the other level, as things began to unfold, there was definitely a layer of what I can only call magic. That which is beyond
Yeah.
Control that seems to have a stronger, more powerful vision of where this is all going and why even some of the things that had occurred before this had occurred almost as a prelude, as a setup for this. So it became on so many levels the defining moment of, I think, both of our lives for very different reasons. And the immediate result was that I, of course, reached out to my family. A few hours later, my other daughter and I were heading to get a plane. My son was going to stay here in the state to manage things. We got to the Tampa airport. They turned us away. Thank you very much, American Airlines. Let's say what? Yeah, just a note, if you happen to be in an environment when someone is dying, do not try to board an American Airlines 45 minutes before the flight. They will not let you.
Oh my goodness.
So, oh yes, even knowing the situation, that was interesting. However, it gave us the opportunity to drive to Miami as a family and really kind of soak things in and still make the flight to Bogota. And then there was yet another flight to a teeny tiny little city that I to this day still cannot pronounce in Colombia. And from there was a 4.5-hour drive to the little hospital where Skylar was. But that ended up being magical. That to me was where the miracle started, was up at 30,000 feet, because that was where I really had to ask myself some powerful questions, and other really difficult things that I'd lived through in my life had propelled me to really dive deeply into the inner game and what makes some people emerge from a crisis as a bigger, bolder version of themselves, right? And so I really just ravenously kind of consumed information about that and played with it in my own life. I've been a huge admirer of the work of Abraham Hicks, and had learned so much from them, been in their hot seat like 4 times. And so as I sat on that plane, I started asking myself some new questions. And it was there that I made the decision that I may not be able to control the outer game, but I sure as heck could play a mean inner game. And that was all I had. None of my branding and marketing and entrepreneurial stuff were going to help me then. It was, and because the worst feeling of all was feeling powerless to help my daughter. There were a lot of awful emotions, but the feeling that I didn't have the capability of doing anything, that was drawing the line. That was not acceptable. And the only place that seemed to have any promise of power was in that inner game, and it was either true or it wasn't, and I was about to find out.
Yeah, and I think if I correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of talk about these different boulders in our lives that kind of cause us to to overcome some of those things that may seem impossible. And so can you kind of speak to that a little bit, and just how I can only imagine what you were kind of going through at that point, because I can't even I don't even know what I would do in that situation. And but I agree with you. I think a lot of it does have to come from our mind and overcoming these obstacles or these boulders that are in our life that we might not be expecting, right?
Yeah. So I think there are a few critical points. The most important thing that I discovered along the way was that it has to be believable. There were 2 really critical questions I had to ask myself, and I believe that everyone should ask when they're facing a crisis. And the first is, what can I control? The second is, what can I believe? What can my mind believe right now? And so the the mission was to find believable thoughts, to ask myself some new questions that could help me get to a place where I was able to shift from seeing only the impossible possibilities and to seeing the I'm possible as more probable than the impossible. And that began for me, and I think it begins for a lot of people by looking around for evidence at other people's lives, other examples that may be there. And so for me, the first question was, okay, had anyone else ever achieved something that everybody else said was impossible? Well, that was kind of a giggle because clearly I was flying through the sky in something that had been considered impossible for the majority of humanity, right? So clearly one person has done something that used to be impossible. And as I look through that, there are many, many, many other examples of that. And same thing with looking at miracles. Had miracles ever occurred? Absolutely. I mean, Hollywood tells renditions of miracles all the time, right? So it was inching my way with one thought that made me feel a little bit better and then a little bit better until I could inch my way from that horrible kind of tornado of despair to even a little bit of hope. And then from a little bit of hope to an inkling of belief. But even belief has some chinks in it. So I still had to keep going from there. And the only way I can describe it is that as I began to really relax into this and risk imagining the I'm possible, because it does take a risk, because we're conditioned to assess things quote unquote realistically. In other words, how many shoes can possibly drop? The entire shoe store, I think, is possible, right? So I had to risk relaxing into this and really imagining the I'm possible. What could this look like? And as I began to do that, it felt as if I almost was lifted up, moved about 5 years in the future, and shown that everything would be fine, whatever the new fine would be. And then one of those little Men in Black things were like, and put me back. So I didn't know the details, but all I had left was the feeling that everything's going to be fine, whatever the new fine will be. And it was a feeling of such knowing in the form of expectation that it became, as odd as this may sound, impossible to conceive that life would not conform to that vision.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So you had mentioned the inner game. I'm guessing some of the stuff that you've just been talking about in this last little, it applies to that inner game that you're talking about. So I'm curious how, if somebody's struggling with their inner game, what are some ways that you have found that we can compensate for that or overcome that and make our inner game stronger?
Well, like anything you're trying to strengthen, it does require practice. And that is a big acknowledgement that, I mean, it took a lot of practice for us to have faith in the things that torture us, right? In other words, we have faith that if someone is diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, they're probably not going to make it. So we have faith in some things that are very uncomfortable, and yet we've not been conditioned to have that same level in faith in the reality of miracles being totally accessible through our inner game. So first of all, we're going to have to practice in order to get there. Little steps for little feet, right? And so I think it begins with being willing to understand some of this, right? Because if you jump, like the formula that I teach has 3 elements. And what I hear, so the first is really this identification piece where you get super clear, crystal clear on where you are and who you are right now and where you want to go, why you want to go there, what's naturally propelling you there, and what might be slowing down your momentum. The second element is the reboot and recalibration. And this is where you look at those things that have been getting in your own way. Where have you been showing up as your own worst enemy? Where have you been settling for less than an optimal personal empowerment system? I mean, it's not enough to know your negative triggers. You really need to understand what your positive triggers are and really stack them up, learn to create a system that'll get you to those goals, right? And then the final element is the unleash. And these are pure outer game sort of things. And it could be something professional with your career. This is where you apply the marketing, the branding, all that kind of stuff. But it's also where a lot of the actual activities and exercises, such as gratitude or, making those kind of lists. But if you skip to the unleash before understanding the identify and the recalibrate, you're taking this is, to quote Esther Hicks, you take yourself with you wherever you go, right? So you're still taking those objections and those weird perspectives into that unleash process. So I think that it's, yes, to me, writing, being grateful touches on so many things that are really critical to our inner game. However, the derailer is they have to be believable to you. It goes back to, where are you really focused? So for example, if I'm writing a gratitude list at the end of the day, and I'm writing something that resembles my grocery list, that is, well, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful to have a job. I'm grateful for my house. I'm grateful for my health. My focus is evident by my emotions. I'm not feeling like, wow, I mean, I'm not getting goosebumps from that list. In fact, if I am executing a gratitude list because I think that this will bring a desired outcome that I don't have right now, my focus, in other words, what I'm feeding energetically, is that which I do not have right now. So guess what? The gratitude list is going to kind of work against you a little bit. Whereas if you really show up with a gratitude list that's like, I am so grateful for this crazy little dog that barks in the middle of the night, but every time I freaking come in the door, no matter how grumpy and how mean I am, this dog tilts her little head, wags her tail, and just makes me freaking melt. I am grateful for this piece of art that is okay, to some people, it might be kind of ugly on the wall, but to me, I found it in this little shop. I remember where I found it. I remember how I debated whether I should get it and then bringing it home and putting it on the wall. And, I don't look at it all the time, but every time I walk by there, it still resonates with me, right? I mean, you can feel the emotion in that. And when your emotion is focusing on things that please you, things that are, into your words, that positivity zone, you are feeding that. That's the antithesis of kind of that blind spot thinking. So I think it's really, 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 if you're starting out and you're bumping up against things, I have an acronym, which is ACT, A-C-T. A is to be aware of where your focus is, be aware of your inner narrative. So, or your outer narrative for that matter too. So another example, most people who come to me, who work with me, come to me, and within a few minutes have said something like this. My biggest challenge is figuring out the how of what to do next, right? And so I will ask them, okay, what do you, and let's just look at the words here. What do you think is the most powerful word in that sentence? Want to guess? Oh, I put you on the spot. It is a trick question. So
What do you think?
so let me jump in. I'm going to let you off the hook here. We'll take you
Okay.
on the little, scary, tricky question tour here. So the word challenge definitely is powerful, right? Because most of us have all kinds of associations of struggle and oh my God, I've tried it so many times, and the last time I tried it didn't work, and oh my God, it's going to be hard. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I want to do it, right? All of those little invisible stories. And even if you're someone who believes that you are exhilarated by the word challenge, if you were exhilarated in this circumstance, you would not have picked that word when you were describing it to me. So yes, challenge is a rough one, but then you amplify it by using biggest. So in other words, I have a lot of challenges, but the biggest one is this particular challenge. However, as they say on those home shopping networks, but wait, there's more, right? You put my in front of it. Notice the statement was not the biggest challenge, it is my biggest challenge, mine. And of course, we fight for what is ours. We fight for our concept of who we are, our identity, right? That is mine. That is like my arm, right? So when an opportunity comes to me, if the opportunity is coming to the me whose biggest challenge is figuring out the how of what to do next, then I am going to respond as the me whose biggest challenge is figuring out the how of what to do next, right? So because that's part of my identity, how I identify myself. However, as powerful as all three of those words are, the most powerful word in this sentence is the one that we pay absolutely no attention to. The word is. Because is makes it fact. It's a declaration. It's truth with all capital letters, which we don't even think of questioning ever. It becomes the programming code for our subconscious and of how we create going forward, right? We don't even realize it's there. Right. It is what it is, right? And it's the one real dun, 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 variation of the truth, right? So the obvious next question of that is, but wait, it is true. It is real, right? I really do have this, I have this challenge. This is my challenge. Are you telling me, after all we've shared, to go stand in front of a freaking mirror and say, I am a money magnet when I owe $100,000 and my mind is going, have you checked your bank account recently? We must not be looking at the same one, right? Not at all. But it is to, again, become aware that there are other variations of reality that you have stopped seeing, that is in the blind spot because of your expectations and your faith in what this situation will roll out to be. So for example, how does my focus is figuring out the how of my next big step forward? That's a lot easier. That feels like, oh, okay, there's potential here, right?
Yep.
Even better, I'm committed to figuring out the how and my next big step forward.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Same variation, but this one is like, I am freaking figuring this out. So you might as well give it to me because I'm figuring it out. Right?
Right.
You see? And so it's learning to be aware of what are your present tense statements. What are you making them mean? And what are the clues that your emotions are giving you when you say them? If your emotions are feeling heavy, you're probably focusing on the lack of the presence of what you want and feeding something that you don't intend to be feeding, right?
Yeah. I really appreciate the fact that you've gone through this really tough struggle, challenge that you were faced with in your life, and you've turned it around, and you've created this positive thing. You had mentioned you talk to people about it, so you're helping others go through their struggles and trials in their lives. So I commend you for that. Near the end of the podcast, Jason and I have come up with what we call the double down dose.
Love
So
it.
I have a question for you, and then Jason will ask you the last question. So
Sure.
Meridith, our podcast is sprinkled with hope, and so we talk a lot about hope, and it's really important to us. But how would you define hope?
Gosh, I love that question. And there's so many ways that I would answer this. To me, hope is the opportunity to embrace the delicious invitation to be fully and completely human and alive. It is to embrace that the boulders that are out there, yes, they may give us some scars, but our scars ultimately have the potential to cry out that we were mightier than the freaking boulders that tried to bring us down. It's the opportunity to discover who we are, especially in the face of adversity, and to dream and to do things that we previously thought were impossible on our terms, and to have a heck of a lot of fun in the process.
I love it. That was great. You've dropped a lot of really cool nuggets, and hopefully those that are listening really do pay attention to those. We've talked about what we identify with, then becomes what we are. And so I really enjoyed that, that piece that you were talking about. And so the second part of the double down dose for you is, what is your definition of love, or how would you define it?
Mm, um, hmm. um,
Yeah, we find this trips everybody up.
yeah, no, I love this question. Well, love is this question. I found it. Love to me is the language of life. Love is the moments that definitely take your breath away and that bring tears of joy. Love is also that the deep, rich courage that it takes to be completely vulnerable, and i.e. vulnerable in this beautiful way of being willing to be fully alive. And love is feeling the joy in the fact that we live in a world of duality, where it's not just those moments that take our breath away that create who we are, but that sometimes that bigger, even better version of ourselves are created by the moments that knock the wind out of us. So love is having the courage to throw your arms wide, be you, own your greatness, and understand that your greatness combined with everybody else's greatness is what creates the magic that keeps the world deliciously unfolding, I think.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. Meridith, thank you so much for joining us. We have really enjoyed this discussion. I think there is a lot of things that you have given not only our listeners, but Jason and I to really think and ponder as we are faced with our boulders in life. We're all going to be faced with them. And so we just have to navigate through those. And I think you've given us some great advice. Just in closing, how can our listeners get in contact with you if they'd like to?
Sure. Well, I would encourage anyone who would like to get into contact with me, not to be shy. Do it. Reach out. I'm on social media. And if you happen to be in a place where you are facing your own boulder, or even if your boulder looks something like you had this vision of where you thought your life would be when you were in your 20s and 30s and 40s, and now you're waking up and finding out that you're not where you want to be, or maybe you are where you had planned to be, but it doesn't feel like you thought it would feel. If you feel like it's time for you to quest for more, then I would like to offer anyone who's listening to share a 20-minute strategy session with me. I will do my best to share with you some insights, some ideas, whatever it is that you might need, whatever I can give you in 20 minutes. And the way that you would connect with me for that would be to go to bit.ly, which is bit.ly/go epic now. And I will share with you guys the link for that. But again, that's bit.ly/go epic now. And I would love to have a 20-minute conversation with anyone who is facing a freaking boulder right now.
Well, thank you for that offer. That's very kind of you. Again, thank you so much for your time today, Meredith. We really appreciate it.
Truly my pleasure. I've loved it.
Yeah, you had some great advice, and I really do hope that people, listen to some of what you've said, and use it in their lives, because I think that we all have different boulders, and it literally could be a boulder physically, or it could be something else that's getting in our way of really us reaching our full potential. That really, I don't think any of us know what that full potential even looks like, but that we tend to get in our own way.
Yeah.
from reaching it. So thank you so much for coming on with us today, Meredith. It's really been a pleasure. So
thank you so much. I have loved it. And thank you guys for doing this show filled with hope. It's wonderful. So keep going strong, guys.
You best believe it.
Fabulous.